This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome to day 2 of SCADA hacking and security from Hackers Rise. I'm OTW, and in today's class, we're going to follow through on what we were doing yesterday. Yesterday was mostly an introduction to SCADA hacking and security. In today's class, what we're going to do is that we're going to be looking at some of the security, the differences between the security of the two types of systems, the traditional IT systems and SCADA systems. I mentioned a little bit about that in day 1. We'll also look at some basic security concepts because we're here not only to hack SCADA systems, but also to secure SCADA systems. The class is SCADA hacking and security. All right, so we're going to do a little bit of security in today's class, and then we're going to do some reconnaissance on. Actually, we're going to do a Modbus simulation. That's what those files are for, and we'll do some reconnaissance on SCADA systems. So hopefully we can get through all of that in today's class. I also, once again, want to thank Voltage for coming in yesterday and doing his presentation. It was excellent. Hopefully it's inspiration for those of you who are in this class or listening to this class. 6 months ago, Voltage was not a hacker. When the war started, Voltage was not a hacker, okay? And in 6 months, he's gone from not being a hacker to impacting the history of the world. Okay, let's put it that way. that's not understated at all. He's gone from not being a hacker to impacting the history of the world. All right, and you can do the same. All right, in that amount of time, less, more. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. But in any case, so that kind of gives you some idea of what you can do, right? If you really want to, if you really want to use your skills to change the world, right? And I think Voltage is doing that. Thank you, Cal. I appreciate that. Okay. Okay, says control says not to spoil the party, but in this case, it's not a hacker, does not equal no. Yes, yeah, it's true that Voltage is a sysadmin, network admin, right? But he went from that, so he had a good foundation to work from, right? And he became a proficient hacker, from the beginning of the war to now, and is actually impacting the history of the world. Okay, so thank you, Voltage. Appreciate it. Okay, keep up the good work. We all appreciate you, what you're doing. And it was an excellent presentation yesterday. Cal says, when I ordered Networking Hack, when it comes out? It comes out this month. Okay, so thank you, Voltage. I appreciate that. Okay, so let's talk about differences between traditional IT security and SCADA ICS. Okay, and some of this has been encompassed in what we've already talked about, right? So let's just kind of talk about the differences, okay? Because there is significant differences between the two. And that's why we have to have a special class just to deal with SCADA ICS, because the security and the hacking are different than traditional IT systems, okay? So in traditional IT systems, we're basically looking at the TCP/IP suite, okay? SCADA ICS systems, we're looking at over 200 different serial protocols. And I wish we could cover all of them, but in this class, we're primarily covering just Modbus. Okay, we did a little introduction to some of the other protocols earlier, but you have to start with Modbus because Modbus is the most widely used. And like I said yesterday, even if the system isn't designed to run on Modbus, it often has a Modbus connection to allow for interconnection to other PLCs from other manufacturers, right? So we're going to focus on Modbus to make sure that you understand how it works, and then we can always move on to other protocols as well. Okay, so so the first difference is the protocol. The protocols are going to be TCP/IP in traditional systems. There's 200 protocols in SCADA ICS, right? In traditional IT systems, our focus is protecting the data. Confidentiality is crucial for personally identifiable information, credit cards, and intellectual property. In SCADA ICS systems, confidentiality is less important. Okay, it's not important. Okay, it's just less important. Now, there sometimes are, there are projects and programming that are key, can be key, but really the process is really what's important here. You want the security of a SCADA ICS system is primarily meant to maintain the process, to keep it running, and to keep it running properly. Because if it doesn't run properly, who knows what happens? And that's why this makes these systems in some ways more delicate, okay, and more vulnerable, because they have to run in a particular sequence of events. I call it being choreographed, okay? And so if one portion of that fails, then the whole system can fail, all right? So we're protecting the process. These systems seldom shut down, sometimes just annual maintenance, okay? And any unexpected shutdown can cost millions or be life-threatening. Patching and upgrading. Now, traditionally in IT systems, the way we secure them is two things. We patch, we upgrade, and we turn off any unnecessary services, right? So in traditional IT systems, the cardinal rule for hardening a system is patching and disabling any unused services. In SCADA and ICS systems, oftentimes you cannot upgrade or patch, okay? At least you can only do it once a year, right? And in some cases, these older systems, there are no patches or upgrades. Right? You'll find some of these systems running operating systems that are 30, 40, 50 years old, right? We know there's no support for them anymore, right? I have seen Windows 95 systems being run out there, all right? And you can find them as well. The legacy systems, sometimes 50-year-old, cannot be patched or upgraded without shutting the entire system down and upgrading the entire facility and software. All right. Access to components. With some exceptions in traditional IT security field, the security engineer has direct physical access to the system components. Right. In SCADA ICS systems, components of the systems may be distributed over hundreds or thousands of miles. Okay, pipelines, electrical grids. This can make implementing security controls challenging and make physical security even more important. And we'll do a section probably on Friday on physical security, because when we're talking about SCADA ICS systems and we're talking about remote terminal units distributed through over hundreds or thousands of kilometers, miles, physical security becomes crucial, right? Because if somebody can take control of one of those remote terminal units, then they can send back, okay, to the central server bogus information. They can spoof users, what have you. So physical security becomes key. Also, as I mentioned yesterday, oftentimes when systems are spread over this larger distance, even over hundreds of acres, right? So like a refinery, communication is done wirelessly most often, okay? And so security of these systems becomes oftentimes a exercise in wireless security, And once again, because these are such carefully choreographed systems, right, that a communication between 2 points, okay, can be deadly, right? So something as simple as a jamming attack, okay, against a wireless communication can have significant repercussions. Remote field stations can become an entry point for the hacker to the entire SCADA ICS system. All right, so that's kind of just the differences. Let's talk about some basic concepts of security next. This is kind of, in terms of security measures. People need to be familiar with security concepts. So if your job is to secure a facility, you need to be able to think about security and risk in a way that is, let's see, not, you have to think about it in a disciplined way. That's probably the best word. You need to have a disciplined concept, because people really have a hard time, general public and people in our industry as well, have a hard time evaluating risks, right? People think about, I don't want to do that risky behavior because, but risk is a function of the probabilities, right, of that event taking place and the impacts that those will have, right? And often the cost, okay? So we got to think about a cost benefit analysis of risk, all right? And most people, general public, and even people in our industry don't think clearly about risk and security. So let's talk about that here, because if your job is to manage the security of any facility, whether it be SCADA or just a traditional IT system, you've got to have this disciplined approach, okay, to security. This is also a key concept on many security exams. So if you're talking about Security Plus, you're talking about CISSP, if you're talking about CCSP, you're talking about any of the certs that are designed for cybersecurity, they almost always test you on the concepts that we're going to be talking about next. Also, I just want to point out that we have the CISSP CERT prep class coming up in November. So if you have any intentions of taking that exam in the near future, I think you'll find it very useful. We'll spend 4 hours a day going over concepts and going through test questions to get you prepared. Even if you're not planning on taking that exam, okay, even if you're not planning on taking that exam, it's good preparation for basically almost any certification exam, or just being able to learn the concepts that are considered to be crucial in cybersecurity. Okay, Voltage says he'd love to attend it. Well, you're certainly invited to attend it. I think it's 14th through the 18th of November, so trying to get it in before Thanksgiving so it doesn't impact people's Thanksgiving plans. So consider that one. If you're a member, pro, or subscriber, you can attend. All right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about some basic security terminology, explore the myths, threats, vulnerabilities, and attacks of ICS systems, define some risk concepts, and once again, I'll emphasize that these are concepts that you'll see on any of the certification exams, okay? There, OptFX just put out, anybody needs sponsorship? ISSP, I assume? Without the sponsor, yep. I lost the audio there for a moment, so yeah, so it's great that he's able to do that for folks. It's nice to have somebody who's out there who's willing to sponsor. But you can take the exam without a sponsor, right? But you don't get the full. I don't know. I think it's called an associate level CISSP. But whether you're going to take the exam or not, it's a great class to get familiar with the key concepts of security that, if you go into a job interview and, you get questions on these concepts and you're not familiar with them, it's going to hurt. Okay, you need to have a grasp of these key concepts, and it's not that it's not that technical, but you have to have a good grasp of everything that's going on in cybersecurity to pass the exam, right? And so we'll cover all those subjects in that class. So put that on your calendar if you're interested. So here we're going to talk about define some risk concepts, examine the fundamentals of assessing risks, list the major security objectives for SCADA. Okay. Here's a simplified security life cycle. You'll see this on many of the exams, including Security Plus, CISSP, CCSP, anything that's dealing with cyber security. So it's a simplified, you identify and manage the risk, reduce the risk through mitigation, measure the effectiveness, and then start all over again. So it's a cycle, okay? It's a never-ending job, all right? You go ahead and you identify and manage, you reduce as best you can through mitigation. And one of the things that is not mentioned here is that you mitigate risk until as long as it's cost effective. Okay, so the concept here is that, oftentimes people will go into security and think about trying to, put in all of these measures to reduce the risks. But at some point, you're spending a lot of money and you're getting very little return for it. So if the probability of a particular attack is, say, 1%, and the impact is going to be $10,000 of loss, and it's going to cost you $100,000, okay, for the mitigation measure. Well, that obviously makes no sense, right? And you have to learn to think that way. Okay, if you don't, you're not going to be as effective in this industry as you think, because this is a business, right? This is a business. People are in here to make money. You got to think in terms of it being a business. This is not a separate discipline all by itself sitting off in a corner. You are part of a business, and you have to think about it as a business. In every security exam, there is the CIA triad, no matter which one you take, all right? You've probably seen this already, but let's go through this again. The CIA triad is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Confidentiality, you protect the privacy and confidentiality of the information. Integrity is you protect the information so it has information from alteration, spoofing, or replay. Okay, so the data has to keep the same. The key here to understand is that these are often conflicting goals. Okay, each one of these is a goal, but they're often conflicting goals. They're usually conflicting goals, right? So if I wanted to just optimize confidentiality, right, I could just not make the systems available. Okay, we're losing the audio again. There's a back. Can you guys hear me? It's back. Okay. So what I was saying is that we need to, oftentimes these three goals are conflicting. And if I just wanted to protect the confidentiality, I would just make the data not available, right? That would make sure that it's safe, right? So these are conflicting goals, and the key to a good security manager, CISO or CTO or security officer, is to balance these goals to optimize the business goals, right? Once again, this is a business. They're out to make money. You have to keep these things in mind. It would be nice if we could say, I just want the most secure system possible, right? If that were the case, then it would make our job a lot easier. But we also have to balance those with the goals of making money and keeping the operation running. Okay. Okay, so CIA ranking for SCADA and ICS, availability. We have to maintain access to the mission critical system. It's the primary priority, okay, in SCADA ICS. Availability. Now, very often in traditional IT systems, confidentiality is the most important. Okay, it depends upon the organization, right? Integrity. prevent unauthorized commands. So we don't want people like Voltage sending in unauthorized commands, right? And because if our job is to protect these, right? If your job is to protect the SCADA ICS system, you don't want outsiders somewhere else on the planet Earth who's sending commands into your system, right? So integrity is very important because these commands can basically open and close valves, change the values, okay, in the registries. The registries are storing values that might say, you know, at this temperature or at this pressure, open the valve, close the valve, okay. So those are, you know, those are the things that are critical, okay, to the security manager in a SCADA system. Prevent unauthorized configuration changes. There's Voltage again, okay. Close this secondary, it's a close secondary priority, okay. And then confidentiality is a tertiary priority, meaning third, okay. It's a lower priority. There's usually in these SCADA systems, you're not going to find credit card numbers and PII, right? That's not their job, right? You're going to find that on the business network, right? But not in the SCADA network. You might find IP in various forms, intellectual property in SCADA systems. So that needs to be protected. So for instance, the project would be built into these systems. The project, the ladder logic that determines how the system runs. As an attacker, that's something we would want, okay, is those projects, because that project is going to tell us, you know, if we can go ahead and download it or find it, then we can figure out how the system works. As Voltage was talking about yesterday, is that, you know, if you can upload or download those projects, you can change the way the whole system works, okay? Voltage says, yeah, you're in there to protect or destroy industrial processes, machines, power, water, etc. If I'm in your project, your company is at my mercy. Exactly, right? So if I'm in your project, you know, then I can change the way the system runs. And I can, you know, if I'm a malicious character, I can change the way the system runs. And the better I understand the system, I understand the project, okay, the more havoc I can rake on your system, okay. And of course, going back to our history, we know that in Stuxnet, that's what the NSA did to the Iranians, is they basically uploaded a new project, okay, and that project changed the speed of the centrifuges that were concentrating the uranium. So, and because they didn't blow up the system, right, it took a long time for the operators to figure out that what had happened. I mean, if they blew up the system, right, they were, oh, those damn Americans, they did it again, right? But because they didn't, they simply made the system not work properly, right? Then it took them a long time to figure out, okay? Says Volta says, and I took a move right out of their playbook, turned all off buttons to on so emergency stop doesn't work. Yep. So cryptography in SCADA, all right. So our cryptography goals include authentication, and we find that there's not much in the way of authentication going on in these systems. More and more systems are, and we'll get into a little bit some reconnaissance in some of these systems, and you'll see what the authentication looks like. Okay, in some cases there's no authentication. Just kind of a heads up, if you guys haven't seen it, I have a tutorial on Hackers Rise of a plant that I took over in 2016. It was a Schneider Electric plant, and I basically got root access on that plant, and I came in as a regular user, right, and was able to escalate privileges very easily and took root on that facility. And I put it all up on Hackers Arise in 2016 to show how easy it was to take over these facilities. You guys, some of you have heard this story before, but you can see it on Hackers Arise. I put it up on Hackers Rise in 2016, and I immediately got a lot of angry emails, mostly from the people at Schneider Electric. I got a few companies who are angry, sent me angry emails, but mostly I got them from Schneider Electric, who thought it was very irresponsible for me to put that up there. And my response to them was, you knew this was the case. You knew that you had this vulnerability and you haven't fixed it. Okay. All I did was show the world how irresponsible you are, okay, in not fixing this. And then they immediately fixed it. so I would like to take some responsibility. Many of those facilities around the world, okay, being safer than they would have been otherwise, right? I mean, I forced Schneider to spend the money to do the work that they should have done, because they knew this was a known vulnerability. They knew about it and they didn't do anything about it. They were just sitting on it, okay? And they said, oh, nobody will notice, that our systems are vulnerable. And then I did it, put it up, showed the world, and actually not that many people noticed until a website that's run by Voice of America did an article on the vulnerability and the lack of security in SCADA systems, and they used my attack as an example of how easy it was to take over, and then everybody got up in arms. So then, because it spread all over the world, and everybody was upset that these systems were so easy to take over. And in this particular system, they could have put some authentication in. It was part of the features in this system, but nobody had put it. Nobody had done anything. It had a whitelist where you could have, restricted it by IP address, by username, and nobody had done it. They had just taken it out of the box and put it into place, and nobody had done anything about security. And so, in that article, I show you how I could have whitelisted myself and blocked everybody else. I could have blocked out everybody else in the world, including the owners of the system, from actually being able to enter their own system. I didn't do that, okay? But because I didn't have any ill intent. My intent was to make the world a safer place, right? And I think I did that. But in any case, some our cryptography goals are authentication, which we'll find that a lot of them don't have any authentication. Non-repudiation, which means that if I do something, I can't say I didn't. That's non-repudiation. Integrity is making certain that the data comes from unchanged from the place it's supposed to be coming from. And confidentiality, I think, is self-explanatory. So types of system controls, we have administrative controls. Once again, these are all on both the Security Plus, the CCSP, the CISSP. These are concepts that are commonly used throughout the industry. We have administrative controls. I think OptFX, who's got a CISSP, can vouch for that. Administrative controls are people and processes, security policies and procedures, security awareness. Technical and logical controls are security software, firewalls, IDSs, smart cards, security configurations, and access control and SCADA application. And physical controls are locks, doors, guards, alarms, and closed circuit TV. More security controls include preventative, put in place to inhibit harmful occurrences, so that prevents harmful occurrences. Detective, okay, is to establish or discover. Okay, so it's not to prevent, it's to discover after it's taken place. And then corrective are to restore the systems that are victims of harmful occurrences. Compensating controls. OptFX says, yep, basically all these are touched upon in the CI system. Exactly. These are concepts you're going to see in any of the cybersecurity exams. Compensating controls, though, these are ones that address the vulnerabilities through additional, alternative, or non-traditional technical, administrative, and physical controls, okay? So, for instance, there's a risk of a shared user ID for all operators prevents accountability and forensics. Okay, so we got one user ID, everybody used the same user ID. We don't know who was in there in the system, right? Because everybody's using the same user ID, okay? The compensating control for such a system might be each user is assigned to an HMI station and the station number is logged for each operation, right? Or, so we don't even have to give it, each one of them is going to have to use a separate system, and we're logging, say, MAC addresses if it's a local area network, or IP addresses. So even though they're all using the same user ID, and that's a risk, we can go ahead and log something that's uniquely identifying each system IP address, MAC address, what have you. That would be a compensating control. That means basically the system has inherent in it a risk, okay, that probably shouldn't be there, but we can come up with a way to be able to manage it, a compensation, okay. Optifix is mostly, it's not highly technical, but very, very broad. Common sense goes a long way, yeah. But you need to know the basic technical aspects of cybersecurity, but it's not really technical. We got to know the basic concepts, and common sense does go a long way. It's very broad. You have to know a lot. You have to know a little about everything, okay, in the CISSP. ICS security myths, okay? Firewall makes you secure. That's a myth, okay? It helps, okay? VPNs can make you secure. It helps, but it's not going to make you secure, all right? They'll all be helpful, okay? Encryption makes you secure. It helps, okay? IDSs cannot identify possible control system attacks, okay? Messaging can be one way. Field devices can't be hacked, okay? You can't keep hackers out. You can keep hackers out, right? You can keep that. That's a myth, okay? More and better widgets can solve security problems. More and better widgets can solve, meaning widgets are saying basically, security tools, right? Security technologies. So security goes beyond just technologies. And this is oftentimes a concept that is lost upon people who are new to the industry, that there's some tool out there, whether it be a firewall or an IDS, us secure. That's not true, and you need to get over that concept, okay, that myth. If there was, then there would be no need for cybersecurity or security information officers, what have you, okay, because it's the job of the security officer to make sure that all of the systems, not just the technologies, all of the systems are working properly to be able to make the system more secure. And I say more secure simply because if somebody has enough resources, enough time and money and knowledge, they're going to hack you, okay? Let's be clear. You're going to get hacked. If a nation state actor, Russia, what have you, US, Israel, China, wants to hack you, okay, and they're willing to spend the money, you're going to get hacked, okay? Now it's your job to be able to detect it and do something about it as quickly as possible, right? But it's almost impossible if somebody is targeting you who has the knowledge, the money, the time, okay, that they can hack you. So some of the cyber threats to SCADA include malware, attackers, insider, and that's one that's often overlooked, okay, is the insider, because they don't have to get past your perimeter. So you can put up all of the perimeter defenses you want, right? You can put up all of the latest and greatest perimeter defenses. But if you've got somebody on the inside who wants to do you harm, it's pretty darn hard to stop them, right? Once again, it's going to come down to how well you can detect and then mitigate what they've done, right? But no, your perimeter defenses are not going to work in that kind of situation. cyber terrorists, industrial spies, foreign intelligence services. Okay, let's see what Voltage had. He says secure backup that is offline is the only way to save yourself from all possibilities. I would agree. The worst, but that's if you're working in a traditional IT system, is the data becomes key. Okay, in a SCADA system, the process is key. The worst crime for a company is to spend millions on developing a SCADA project for your company, and you don't have 100 megs of code backed up offline. You're right. Okay, so yeah, I mean, in this case, it's only 100 megs of code in a project in SCADA. But when we're talking about traditional IT systems, okay, it's key to have those backups, and they have to be offline and probably off-site, okay, to be able to make sure they're secure. So off-site means that if the building burns down and you got your backups in the same building, or you have a flood, or you have a hurricane, or you have an earthquake, those backups become useless. Okay, so make sure they're both offline and off-site. Criminals, phishers, and spammers are also a threat. Botnet operators are a threat. Okay. ICS vulnerability landscape. We have policy and procedure vulnerabilities. Okay, so these include things like platform vulnerabilities. These include platform configuration vulnerabilities, platform hardware vulnerabilities, platform software vulnerabilities, and platform malware protection vulnerabilities. Okay. Network vulnerabilities include configuration vulnerabilities, hardware vulnerabilities, perimeter vulnerabilities, monitoring and logging vulnerabilities. Once again, oftentimes, we're focused on, the logging and monitoring, but if somebody's into your system with root access, right, they can turn off all the logging and your system security measures off. But you can't recover without the backups. Okay, looks like we lost the audio for a second there. You need those backups to recover. Now, depending upon how often the backups are is going to determine how much damage is going to be. If you're backing up once a month, then you're in serious trouble. Okay, if you're backing up every day, then you've lost a short bit of money, a short bit of time. Some of the major financial institutions will back up basically their databases almost every minute, okay? And they're doing incremental backups every minute, and then they're doing full backups every day, okay? OptiFX says the org may survive, but you're simply firefighting by the time you're calling Iron Mountain. Yeah, it's interesting that OptiFX makes a reference to Iron Mountain, because Iron Mountain is the company who keeps the off-site backups. And those of you who are fans of Mr. Robot, like I am, will recognize that is actually Steel Mountain in Mr. Robot in season 1, episode 4 and 5, right? They go to hack Steel Mountain, and that's actually a reference to a real company called Iron Mountain, who's the largest company to store your backups off-site. Okay, there's a lot of things about Mr. Robot that are based upon reality. That's why one of the reasons that I like it so much is that they had a whole team of hackers and IT people who were consultants to that show to make sure that everything was accurate. And that's kind of why David Bombal and I are doing those YouTube videos on it now. Anyways, communication vulnerabilities, wireless connection vulnerabilities. We got to talk about these later in class, okay? But this is a big deal for the SCADA systems that are spread over large territories, okay? Joe Fiffick says, backup saved us when the UHS breach happened. 220 plus hospitals took 5 weeks to restore everything. Did not pay the ransom. Yep, that's key. okay? So the human element is less the risk in regards to the ICS given a heavy focus on processes. I don't know that I would say that. I don't know, Nephis, is that how you pronounce Nephos? Okay. I'm not sure the human element's always important. You know, I get a little tired of people in cybersecurity always blaming the human element, right? Somebody tweeted out yesterday, I don't remember who it was, somebody who I respect tweeted out, and I retweeted that I'm tired of hearing cybersecurity people always blaming the human element. If I think it was a her, she said, if there's an opportunity for the human to be exploited, then it's your fault. Okay, you need to make sure that doesn't happen. That can't happen. Okay, and stop always turning on the user and blaming the user. Okay. OptFX says most organizations cannot survive 5 weeks, but that's a hospital system. Okay. Oh yeah, Nick said it was hacks for pancakes. You're right. Was it? No, I think it was somebody else who said it. It was, but I think hacks for pancakes actually retweeted it, and I retweeted it as well. But on one of the YouTube videos with David Bombal, he had made some comment about the weakest link being the user, and I said, as long as you believe that, okay, as long as you believe that, that's going to be true, okay? It's up to you, okay, to make sure that the user is not the weakest link. Okay? And as long as you believe that, that's going to be true. And by your continuing to think and say that, you are creating a gap between the user and the cybersecurity people. You need to integrate, okay, the user as part of the cybersecurity team. You need to make them part of the team, that we're working together to keep this thing from taking place. As long as you're willing to always think of the user as your weakest link and always blame them, okay, then you're always going to have this cultural gap between the user and the cybersecurity. What you need to do is bring them in and embrace them and make them part of the team of cybersecurity. Cal says, so basically count on human error as something that can occur and make measures to prevent it. Yes, right. But minimize the chances of human error, right? Minimize the chances of human error. That's part of, your job is not simply to put up, more defenses. Your job is to make sure that there are systems in place so that the user can't make a mistake, okay? And that's usually beyond what most people in cybersecurity think is part of their responsibility, okay? They want to work with like new and latest greatest technology. We want to tweak it, but rather than, if you think that your greatest threat is coming through the user, then you need to work with them and come up with ways to secure them, okay? But anyways, that's enough about that. Policy and procedure vulnerabilities, okay? Inadequate security policies for the ICS. We'll find that very often, that oftentimes ICS, SCADA systems, there is no security policy, right? So no formal ICS security training and awareness program. This kind of goes to what I was just saying, is that, in many organizations and highly secure organizations, security training and awareness is always a big part of what they do. This is embracing the user and saying, you are part of the cybersecurity team, all right? It's up to all of us to keep this organization secure, and not to talk down to them, to not to feel like, it's your fault if we get hacked. It's all of us. It's all of us working together will keep this organization secure. OptFX is, yep, first and foremost, keep it simple. That's probably a good rule for about everything, right? Is to keep it simple. That's kind of my rule, is always keep it simple, all right? I hope I accomplished that in Linux Basics for Hackers. That was the whole plan in that book, was to keep it simple, right? And keep it small, keep it approachable, keep it something that people can read in a few days and grasp. And I hope I did that. Inadequate security architecture and design. No specific or documented security procedures were developed from the security policy from the ICS. So if there is a security policy, there's no documented security procedures. Absent or deficient ICS equipment implementation guidelines. A lack of admin mechanisms for security enforcement. Few or no security audits on the ICS. Going to keeping it simple, I think that almost everything, if everything can be kept simple, you don't have to get really, really complex and advanced to be effective. Most things can be broken down to very simple components. And so if you do that, you're going to get a lot more buy-in and acceptance from the people you're working with. Okay. If you try to talk about all these highfalutin concepts and talk down to people, you're never going to get buy-in. People, and buy-in's critical. Buy-in means that the people accept it and will accept it and embrace it. They say, yes, we are a team. We need to do this because all of our jobs are dependent upon it. Our organization's dependent upon it. We love this company and we want to keep it running, and this is what we have to do. All right. So this is my approach to security. Right? It's not only technical, but it's also human. You need to embrace the human. And not look down upon the human. And that's why I always object to people saying the weakest link. If the people are okay, that's what security is all about. Okay, or it's a big element of it. So I was that's why I was so happy to see somebody yesterday tweet out. Maybe it was Leslie Carhart, Hacks for Pancakes. I'm not sure, but in any case, Leslie Carhart is a wide, highly regarded security expert, and she's tweeting that same subject. I'm embracing that same subject, so keep that in mind. If this is something that industry you want to work in, don't get caught up in the user is always the weakest link of cybersecurity. If you go in with that concept, there it is. It was Sharad DeGrepo. That's right. Thank you, Renegade. Sharad DeGrepo was the one who tweeted it yesterday. And I agree 110% with that concept. Okay. If your people are taking down the organization by their mistakes, it's your fault. Okay. You're the one who's in charge of cybersecurity, right? You need to make certain that they cannot make those mistakes. Okay. Anyway, so enough about that. Lack of admin mechanisms for security enforcement. Few or no security audits for the ICS. No ICS specific continuity of operations or disaster recovery claim, a DRP. And lack of ICS specific configuration change management. I will just to close that subject, that as long as you think and keep on saying that the user is the weakest link, okay, you are creating a gap, okay, between you and the user. All right, you are creating the gap, right, rather than embracing those people and bringing them into your team. Okay, you're saying you guys aren't as good or smart as us, and as long as you do that, they will be the weakest link. So cybersecurity is not just technical stuff. Sometimes, very often, it's management of people, right? So let's see, anything else? Even the most complex is broken down in a single piece. Yeah, I like that. I like that analogy there. OptFX says even the most complex puzzle is broken down into a single piece at a time. And keep that in mind, right? That's wise words there, right? That no matter how complex the subject is, okay, it can always be broken down to very simple steps, okay? Platform configuration vulnerabilities in SCADA ICS. The OS and vendor software patches may not be developed until significantly after the vulnerabilities are found. That's what I was talking about in 2016, is that there was a vulnerability that was known in that system, and I don't know, it was like 6 months or a year, and I'm saying these guys still haven't fixed this known vulnerability, so I'm going to go and exploit it and show the world. And that's what happened. And then when I did, they went and fixed it. Okay. OS and application security patches are not maintained. OS and application security patches are implemented without testing, and default configurations are used. And that's often the case. Both, you very often will find default passwords, okay, in these systems. That's why I have in the SCADA ICS section of Hackers Arise, I've got a list of all the default passwords. And you would be, maybe you wouldn't, but I'm always surprised and disappointed that how many systems still have default passwords in place, right? And if you know what the default password is, very often you can log in. And even if they don't have the default passwords, very often there's no lockout on these systems. So you can just use, use a password tool, password cracking tool, to just keep on trying passwords, right? And unlike, say, the lockout on your local area network where you try 3 times, you fail, and it locks you out. Very often there's no lockout at all. More platform configuration vulnerabilities. We have critical configurations are not stored or backed up. The data is unprotected on portable device. There's a lack of adequate password policy. That's what I was just referring to. There's no password. Some cases, no password at all is used, and that I found as well. I found systems there's no password, right? Or the password is hard coded, and you can find it, say, in the directories in the web server. So if you start going around through the directories of the web server, you'll find the password in there, right? Because it was hard coded when they built the system and nobody's taken it out, okay? Password guessing is possible because oftentimes there's no lockout and there's inadequate access controls applied. So for instance, in the system that I hacked in 2016, they could have, okay, they could have put access controls on, but they didn't. There was a system in place to put access controls in, right? And nobody bothered. They'd just taken it out of the box, put it up, and nobody bothered to do anything with it to secure it. If I really was malicious, I could have really wreaked havoc on that facility. I had root access, so I could have done anything, right? And I could have locked them out forever. Some of the platform hardware vulnerabilities include inadequate testing of security changes, inadequate physical protection for critical systems. Unauthorized personnel have physical access to equipment. So oftentimes, if you have physical access, game over, right? If I have physical access, game over. Insecure remote access on ICS components. Dual network interface cards to connect the networks. Undocumented assets. So one of the things that is encouraged and strongly encouraged when you're starting to work on a security program for anybody, okay, ICS or not, is that you have to know, what are your assets? What do I have here, right? If I can't really do a good job of protecting if I don't know what my assets are, right? I got to figure out what my assets. And also, I would say that in one of the things that I have found in SCADA ICS system is that people don't know all of the systems, all of the assets, and all of the connections. Right? Nobody has documented that, right? And connections become really critical. So if you're trying to protect the system, you have to know, what are the routes in? And oftentimes there's more routes in than people will tell you. They'll say, oh yeah, there's only one in, and that is the HMI. But we'll find out when we start analyzing it, there's many other routes into the system, okay? Other hardware vulnerabilities include radio frequency, electromagnetic pulse, right? So if we have communication taking place via radio waves, right? And I think, once again, I'll put a plug in for my SDR class. I think that radio hacking is one of the most underappreciated areas of cybersecurity, right? So if I'm in a SCADA ICS facility and I'm dependent upon radio communication, right? So Wi-Fi is radio, right? Satellite is radio, right? These are all radio signals. And if I'm dependent upon these signals for the smooth running of my operation, if those signals can somehow be corrupted or blocked, then my operation fails. Now, of course, there's all kinds of other operations that can be disrupted by hacking radio signals. You know, we can go on and on about, you know, cell service is all radio, aircraft communication. Your car keys are communicating to the car by radio. Your car is communicating to other facilities by radio. Okay. So these are all radio signals, and there's so many of them that we don't even think about how much we're dependent upon smooth communication via radio signals. And you know, these can be hacked. OptFX is, speaking of complexity versus simplicity, as a side note, I was quite shocked during coursework at Hopkins that the Solarium Commission is recommending to the government to focus heavily on quantum computing techs. I find that absolutely laughable, as most people in the industry are still entirely inept at even protecting and attacking the most ubiquitous x86, x64 systems. Yeah, I would have to agree. Okay, I mean we need to be able to secure the systems that we have first. Okay. And platform vulnerability, lack of backup power. Okay, loss of environmental controls. Right, lack of redundancy of critical components. Lack of environmental control, what we're talking about here is environmental being temperature, humidity, okay? These are key sometimes to having a safe and reliable system. So oftentimes we focus upon the outside attacker, but if, you know, we have a disaster take place, right, and our systems are down because of that, you know, that is a security failing. Platform software vulnerabilities, you know, the one that's often spoken about is buffer overflows. Okay, the installed security capabilities are not enabled by default. A buffer overflow, by the way, is simply where you have a area of memory, okay, that is not properly controlled so that the attacker can push out the data and put their own data inside that memory area. And that data, okay, could be commands such as a rootkit that will enter it. When people talk about remote control of a system, it's usually by a buffer overflow. Okay, that's usually the way it takes place. Okay. Installed security capabilities are not enabled by default, like the system I was referring to. A DOS attack, a denial of service. Denial of service is you know, is often poo-pooed as being a simple, but it is. It's a very simple attack, right? But think about a SCADA system, a denial of service attack on a SCADA system. Once again, the key is to keep the process running. And if I can keep that system from running by a DOS attack, I've done some serious damage, right? Now, once again, DOS attack is usually very simple to do. Oftentimes, it comes down to simply flooding the system with too much information. At the very beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war, about 100,000 hackers from around the world flooded Russia with just junk data. And we were able to knock out many of the critical systems inside of Russia for about 4 or 5 weeks. Okay, they weren't able to communicate via internet. All their websites were down, and eventually, they responded to that adequately. They said that they had identified 17,000 IP addresses who were involved in that, and that they were going to get retribution on all of us. I'm sure they're still trying, but actually there was far more than 17,000. But they identified 17,000. I estimate it was closer to 100,000 of us who went after them, and we showed them at the beginning of the war that we were serious about protecting Ukraine, and they certainly were unprepared for it, and we were able to cause some major problems in their just basic communication in Russia. For instance, we had their stock market was down for 5 weeks. Also, including mishandled or undefined. So, but also denial of service can also be can also involve, most of the times, is simply flooding a website or an installation with too much data. But it also can be if I can get the system to run, say, in an infinite loop, right? And it uses up all of its own resources. Or if I can get it to reboot, okay? Those are also denial of service. So you got to think beyond simply the flooding. There's other ways of creating denial of services. And if you can get a SCADA system to shut down, okay, then obviously you've done some serious damage. Mishandled, undefined, poorly defined, or illegal conditions. OLE, for process control, the OPC relies upon remote procedure call and distributed component object model, which have over the years had many vulnerabilities. Use of insecure industry-wide ICS protocols, okay, and use of clear text. I think that Voltage showed us the other day where there was credentials being passed in clear text. Other software vulnerabilities included unneeded services running. Okay, the two hardening a system are, okay, the two cardinal rules are turn off all unnecessary services, okay, because every service has a vulnerability. The more services that are running, the greater your attack surface. That means there's greater probability of being hacked. The more services that are running, the greater the probability of being hacked. All right. So if I'm attacking a system, all right, I go and I look at all the services that you have running, and I try to find the one that's most vulnerable, that's most easy to attack. And it would be silly of you to allow a service to be running that you don't need that's vulnerable. All right. So you need to get rid of any services that you don't need. And vulnerable services, and you need to get rid of them. You need to stop them. And he said, well, I don't know if I need them or not. I'm not sure if I need them or not. He says, well, the sure way to find out is to turn them off and see who screams. If nobody screams, then you don't need them. And you're like, no, I can't do that. I'll lose my job. Okay. So he was adamant. He was not going to do that. So it made it really hard to secure his system. Okay. So turn off any unneeded services. Use of proprietary software that's not been discussed at conferences or in periodicals. So the proprietary software often is not vetted. Okay, vetted meaning that people have tested it to make sure that it is safe. Going back to 2016, we all know that the Russians came in during the 2016 election were able to hack the Democratic Party. And the way they did that is that the Democratic Party had proprietary software running on their systems, and they simply found a vulnerability in it. It was not properly vetted, right? If it's most software that's out there, there's a process of vetting its security. The Democratic Party had bought some software that was from a local vendor, and they bought it from them, and it had lots of vulnerabilities in it. The Russians found them, were able to hack the system, and the rest is history, as they say. Okay. OptFX says it's easy to presume that security has improved exponentially over the years. This is an absolute fallacy. The key word there is exponentially. Security has improved, but not exponentially. Okay, so security has improved over the years, but not exponentially. I see that it's 20 minutes after the hour. Let's go ahead and take a little break. We'll come back in 15 minutes. So let's come back at 35 minutes after the hour, and we'll continue to cover some of these security issues with ICS, and then we'll get into our Modbus simulation, and then we'll do some reconnaissance. Okay.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, we're back. So we were looking at platform software vulnerabilities. We were left off here. We're talking about intrusion detection prevention software is not installed. I can give you an example. I was working with a major bank in New York City, right? Going to be a target for all kinds of attacks, you would think, right? And so as I was doing my security review for them before I started the pen test, is I said, where is your IDS, okay? And where can I see the logs from the IDS? And I was working with the CTO and the chief security officer, right? They're both really smart guys, right? And neither one of them knew where it was at. And I said, how is that possible? You don't know where it's at. And they said, because we never check it. We put it in place, but we have never gone to check the logs or the alerts. Right? So that tells you you may have actually done business with this bank. So especially if you're in the US, you may have done business with this bank. And they had put an IDS in place, believe it or not, and never checked it. And it had been there for years. And I said, well, why did you put it in place in the first place if you're not going? How long ago was this? Oh, I'd say it's about 3 or 4 years ago, right around there. I said, why did you put it in place in the first place if you're not going to use it, if you're not going to check it? And they said, because the bank regulators told us we had to put one in to meet compliance. And so they did, and they were compliant with the bank. So the bank regulator said, oh, okay, you got an IDS in place, you're compliant, okay? Yet they had never, ever checked it, okay? So yeah, IDS intrusion prevention software is not installed, and sometimes it's installed, but nobody's paying any attention to it, okay? And so this is a good example of that, is that they have the security measures in place, but they don't do you any good unless you use them, unless you're actually checking the logs. And that comes to another issue, is that you can be out there logging, all the activity on your network, but who's checking the logs? Okay, is somebody checking the logs daily? Okay, weekly, monthly? Okay, yeah, compliance with standards is not security. Exactly. So, a lot of companies I've worked with don't check their logs. There's nobody checking the logs. And if they are checking the logs, they don't really know how to read them, right? So they don't know what the logs say. And so, yeah, so that's a good security measure if you actually check the logs, okay? So yeah, intrusion detection prevention, and I don't know to this day if they've ever been hacked, but I found so many deficiencies in their system, and they had a Windows XP system running too. This is like 3 or 4 years ago. They had a Windows XP system running at this institution, and I pointed out to them, your whole network could come down because of this Windows XP system, and they took it down. They took it down, but it was amazing to me they hadn't been hacked. It's just amazing to me. So, but I've also worked with an institution a little longer ago than that. Maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. It was a major hospital that had a Windows 95 system. Okay, Windows 95 system. So when people tell you that there aren't these old, outdated systems out there, they're wrong. They are wrong. As a matter of fact, soon we'll see how we can check. But these systems, companies keep these systems around because they work, right? Like they don't get hacked, okay? And oftentimes they have proprietary software that will only run on these old operating systems, so they keep them around. And it's even more true in SCADA, ICS. Yeah, Nefo says I saw a Windows XP in a major hospital a couple weeks ago. Maybe it was the same hospital. Oh, actually, that was a Windows 95 system in this hospital that I went to. It was a Windows 95 system. But yeah, I mean, so the idea that everybody updates and upgrades their systems, that's some fallacy. Okay, it doesn't happen because once again, you got to think about the institution. This is a business, and their job is to make money, okay, to keep the institution running. And so, as long as there's not a problem, oftentimes they will leave these systems in place. In some cases, there's other reasons, like the system can't be taken down, it can't be updated, it can't be upgraded. In the case of the Windows 95 system, 20 years ago, the hospital had purchased proprietary software, okay, proprietary software that only ran on Windows 95, and that software had never been updated, and there was not another vendor that produced that software. So as a result, they had to keep this Windows XP, Windows 95 system running. Okay. The administrator says, "Yep." Cyber Mayhem says Putin runs Windows XP still. I think that's a mistake. I think a lot of people have been saying that. What he's actually running is the Russians run a version of Linux that has a GUI. Yeah, Astra. Michael McBride says Astra. It's a version of Linux called Astra that's meant to be more secure than other versions of Linux, and it looks a lot like Windows XP. So that's where the confusion came about, that everybody was saying Putin runs, because there's several pictures online of Putin at his desk, and it looks like an XP screen in front of him, but it's actually Astra Linux. Okay, so Cal says, so like this may be a little off topic, but how do you stress to them the importance of upgrading outdated systems? Well, that's that's something that you're going to have to work out with them. I mean, this is what I was saying earlier about oftentimes security is a human management problem, right? And people who are new to the industry think of it as security as being, well, you just got to have the newest and latest and greatest technology, but that's not the case. Oftentimes, it's simply a human management. Even it can be human management, meaning the management, meaning the CEO, and CTO, and others, and CFO, and it can also be a human management problem down to the end user. Okay, so keep that in mind, and that's where a lot of people who are new to cybersecurity kind of scoff at these issues of human management because they want to think about technology and not about humans. But humans are a big part of it, right? This is what everybody is telling you. You probably have all heard this over and over again, that the human element is the weakest element of cybersecurity, right? You've all heard that, right? And I reject that. okay? So if that were true, okay, then your job is to be a human manager and eliminate and mitigate that risk, okay? Because your job is not just technical, your job is cybersecurity. If the humans are the problem, then you need to find a way to mitigate that problem. Okay, so anyways, moving on. We've talked enough about that, okay? Logs are not maintained, or logs are maintained, but nobody's looking at them. And incidents are not detected, okay? Malware protection software is not installed, okay? Malware protection software definitions are not current, okay? Obviously, one of the things that a lot of people mistake is that all antivirus software is the same. Okay, it's not. Okay, it's not the same. Some are better than others. So people say to me, "Well, I have antivirus software. How could I have gotten hacked? Okay, how could I have antivirus software?" Attacks. It doesn't detect unknown attacks, the 0 day, right? So, but there are, as antivirus is getting more sophisticated, they are implementing what are called heuristics. And heuristics are basically looking for behavior. So if, for instance, a program was trying to change your system files or change your registry, that's probably malicious, right? So even though they may miss it on a signature, okay, but its behavior looks malicious. The only problem with that is that it takes a lot of CPU cycles. It takes a lot of work to be able to do heuristics. And everybody wants the antivirus to finish its work as fast as possible, and they don't want their system to be slowed down, right? So heuristics are being implemented in much of the antivirus software, but even the best antivirus, when you run it, when you run known attacks, known malware against antivirus, it'll detect about, some of them as low as 50%. Okay, there's some antivirus out there that can only detect 50, 70%, but the best will detect 98%. That still means 1 out of 50 is getting through. How could I have gotten it hacked? I have antivirus. Cyber mayhem says, is it AI? Well, basically, it's simple AI, right? And maybe in the future, we'll get more sophisticated AI in an antivirus, okay? Says OptiFX says, I was on a contract at Walgreens Alliance Boots not long ago doing VDI work, and they still run XP, SP3, and IE6. Exactly. Thank you for that, okay? Because this is the real world, folks. This is the real world is that people are running ancient systems. People in our industry often look at themselves, they look at the people around them, and they go, "Oh yeah, everybody's running Windows 11, right? Aren't they? Why would you bother with Windows XP? Because everybody runs Windows 11 or whatever the latest and greatest version is." But the reality is that's not true. Okay, and it only requires that there be one system that's vulnerable to take down the entire organization. Okay, that's the real world. Okay, all right. So malware protection software is not installed. Malware protection software definitions are not current. Okay. Cyber Mayhem says in Kenya everybody's running Windows 7, which has lots of vulnerabilities. And once again, that's Kenya. Okay, and that's other countries that are not necessarily willing to pay for the latest and greatest. All right. Um, Malware protection software is implemented without exhaustive testing. Network configuration vulnerabilities. Let me read Torgny's question here. Cyber deception. what are the tactics of increasing the attack time as an attack defense, okay, to get detection reactions? Well, one of the things we'll do in the class is we'll put together a honeypot, as you're making reference to there, that can slow the attacker down, right? So if you put out a honeypot on your network and try to, and monitor it, of course, right? You can slow them down so you know what they're coming after you, and two, maybe detect what they're using against you or about to use against you. So there are some advantages of putting a honeypot out there. Okay. I think it's the first question we've had from Torgny. I think, Torgny, are you in Sweden? Is that right? Do I remember correctly? In Sweden? Yes, Sweden. Okay. We got most of Europe covered. Kenya, Philippines, Mexico, Canada, US, of course. Am I missing anybody? Norway. I said most of Europe. Okay. So I was including you, Chris. Okay. I think we have almost every country in Europe covered in today's class. Um, so other things, we talk about network configuration vulnerabilities, weak network security architecture, data flow controls are not employed, poorly configured security equipment, network device configurations are not stored or backed up, passwords are not encrypted, as Voltage showed us in that Russian system, and also a very weak password where the user was using their birth date, right? So that makes it pretty easy, even if it was encrypted, right? If he's using his birth date to, and when you're trying to crack passwords and they're all digits, that makes it pretty easy to crack, right? That's not a very complex password, okay? So it's pretty easy to crack, and you can go ahead, and if you know the user, you go find their birth date and try it out. Right? I've done this many times. Okay, people get into all of this, trying to use various techniques to crack passwords. But the first thing before you do that is find out everything can know about the user and start using that, okay, as passwords. I mean, I remember one time I found the user's social security number, right? And of course, it was just their social security number. I got the social security number and I tried it and let me right in. Okay. So, or the SCADA network and OrkNet. That makes it much easier. Voltage says the SCADA system and OrkNet was only a numeric password. That makes it much easier to break, okay, by brute force, okay? OptFX is to be found in just about any large mall. They're everywhere, yeah. Passwords are not encrypted. Passwords exist indefinitely on network devices. Okay, so that means that if the user that same user may be part of another institution, like whatever, they put their password into their fitness software, and that fitness company gets hacked. You'll find those passwords, of course, on the dark web, and you just go ahead and use the same password. And I've done this many times as well. Okay, is that I have a user, I go check the dark web to see if their account's been hacked, and sometimes multiple times it's been hacked, and you can find all the passwords that they've used over time, and oftentimes they'll reuse the same password with slight variations. So even though that they may have changed the password, people don't want to work real hard. I mean, and they have a difficulty remembering their passwords, so they keep the passwords as variations. They'll change it, but they'll say, it used to be, say his birth date, and he'll change it by 1 day or 1 year, what have you, and you can get in that way. So anyways, passwords exist indefinitely on the network devices. That is a problem, all right? Inadequate access control applied, yes. Cyberman says, will you teach this in OSN? Yeah, it is part of the OSN class. Okay. Other network hardware vulnerabilities include inadequate physical protection of network equipment, unsecured physical ports. Okay, so the problem here is that if a port is unsecured, an unauthorized person may be able to connect to that port, okay, and wreak havoc on the system. A loss of environmental control, non-critical personnel have access to equipment and network connections, a lack of redundancy for critical networks. I will also throw in here a single point of failure. Okay, once again, these are just basic cybersecurity concepts, right? A single point of failure where there's one system that if it goes down, everything goes down. For instance, some of the manufacturers have been trying to sell these firewall IDSs that are combined into a single appliance, right? Yeah, I mean, it might be cheaper, it might be easier to work with, but now you have a single point of failure. If that goes down or it gets hacked, okay, so one of the things that we often don't think about is that the security devices get hacked, right? If the security devices get hacked, then and you only have one device, then you're dead. No security perimeters defined. Firewalls are non-existent or properly configured. Control networks are used for non-control traffic. Control network services not within the control network. Increasing risk factors, some of the major ones include adoption of standardized IT technologies, okay? SCADA inherits the IT vulnerabilities, especially those that are using OPC. They're inheriting the IT vulnerabilities of Microsoft products, all right? Serial communications are going to TCP/IP, so these means that more people can connect to SCADA systems. So these are specific to SCADA. SCADA systems are connected to the network, so that they're connected to the business network, okay? And that means if for every business connection network, then when the business network gets hacked, which it will, that means that the attacker can get into the SCADA network. And once again, I'll use the example of 2014 when the Russians attacked the Ukrainian electrical grid. That's how they got in. They didn't attack the SCADA network, they attacked the business network. And then from the business network went across into the SCADA network. And this is common, okay? It's common. If I'm an attacker, it's easier oftentimes to get into the business network and then just use that connection to get into the SCADA network. That's why segregation becomes so key, okay? Constraints on the use of existing security technologies and practices. What this is saying here is that in some cases, security practices and technologies are not implemented because of some of the difficulties of working in a SCADA environment. Some of the practices we talked about, just as an example of, like, for instance, updating and patching. Well, that's not really realistic in a SCADA environment. Once a year maybe, but not on a daily or weekly basis, okay? Insecure and rogue connections. Oftentimes these SCADA systems, people don't know what the connections they have. Oftentimes vendors will have a connection to the SCADA network. Okay? They insist that they have to have this, call it a backdoor, call it a port that's open, that they use to be able to connect to the SCADA network. Okay? If you're not, as a security personnel, if you're not aware of that, you can't secure that, right? So if they get hacked, then you get hacked, right? Let's see what we have in terms of questions here. OptiFX says, I worked at a law firm in New York City. They had the latest and greatest cybersecurity controls and hardware, and when they brought in a new SAN, storage area network, the vendor attached a modem with default authentication, completely bypassing all security controls. Once they are on the SAN running Linux, you could hop anywhere. Yep. Okay. Bolt says the SCADA network needs to be protected from external, wide area network, and internal LAN and Wi-Fi in equal measure. Yep. And then some of the minor factors include widespread availability of information. There's document on the serial comms. You know, what we'll see later in class is that on many, not many, almost all of these SCADA systems, you can pull down PDFs of the documentation, okay? Yep, PDFs and manuals are your friend is what Michael says, okay? You can pull down complete documentation on these systems from the vendor website, right? And they're very revealing as to how the system works. So don't overlook that. I've used the PDFs very often in SCADA. Just going, I determine what the manufacturer is, what the product is, and then once I know that, I just go to the vendor website, download the PDF, and voila, I have all the information I need. Difficulty of SCADA risk assessments, the consequences are often large or even considered immeasurable. For instance, a nuclear power plant, you know, the consequences are so big that they're almost incomprehensible, right? Could be massive loss of life, massive environmental damage, massive loss of critical resource delivery. Very large consequences make risk numbers very, very large, right? The threat is hard to quantify. So the threat is the outsiders who are trying to come in. Okay, so you have both the consequences here could be so large, and it's hard then to quantify the risk. So how do you do a risk analysis here? How do you do a cost benefit analysis if you can't measure the consequences, or the consequences are so large they're incomprehensible? And if you can't measure what the threat is, if you don't have those two pieces of those two numbers, you really can't do a good assessment on your risks. Also, the threat's hard to quantify. Notice here that SCADA attacks are not reported. Okay, so this becomes a real important. So when you're doing a risk assessment on any institution, you know, you're trying to determine what the potential consequences are and the probability of an attack. Part of your assessment of probability attack is, has the equipment in my industry been attacked, right? So if I'm in the banking industry and bank A gets attacked, okay, and I have the same equipment and software as they do, then I have a pretty good probability I'm going to get attacked, right? But if bank A never reports it, I don't know that, right? I don't know, I don't have that information, which makes the risk much, much higher. Focus on ranking and prioritizing the risks. Okay, so we're going to talk about risk assessment, and then we'll get into some Voltage says, we have a joke. Pootler should have admin added as a line to his gravestone because default creds are among the key failures in cyber. You know, admin will work on an awful lot of systems, as you're referencing there in Russia, but it'll work throughout the world, okay? Is that if any of you have gone and viewed my last SCADA class, I think it was the 2020 class, where I had a group of people from a Romanian AV company. Okay, so they were all signed up. The company was putting them through my SCADA class, and so I focused on Romanian systems in that class. And in class, we took over a major Romanian telecom company. Okay, that we just went in with admin and got root privileges and took over the entire Romanian telecom system, a major Romanian telecom system. So that's out there. Watch my 2020 version of this class. Maybe we'll try it again. Okay, today we get into that part of the class, and if you spend the time searching around, okay. Ross Telecom is your second home? Yes. When you're trying to get into a system, don't overlook simply trying simple usernames, simple passwords. It works a lot, more than it should, okay? But I've gotten into a lot of systems with just admin, and it's just like scary how often it works. Okay, or you go look up the default username and passwords, and very often, especially in SCADA, default username and passwords are often left in place more than you'll find in other places. Okay. All right. So move on. Okay. Risk assessment. The risk is the possibility of a threat agent acting upon a vulnerability causing harm to a resource. This is a concept that you'll find repeated over and over again in Security Plus, in CISSP, what have you. And you need to have a good grasp of this risk assessment to pass that exam, or at least pass that section of the exam. And we'll spend a lot more time on this in the CISSP class because it's so important to that class. But we'll talk briefly about it here. Okay. Risk is quantified and qualified by how likely the event is to happen and how severe the consequences would be. Okay, so the probability of it happening and how severe the consequences are. That's the risk assessment. Okay. Threat is anything capable of causing harm. Okay. Vulnerability is a weakness. Just defining some terms here. Likelihood is a measure of probability. So probabilities are measured between 0 and 100%, right? Usually they're expressed in terms of decimal. So the probability, 100% probability would be 1.00. A 10% probability would be 0.10, okay? The impact is the measure of the magnitude, severity of the consequences. So the risk then is the likelihood times the impact. So likelihood is expressed as a probability. Okay, let's think about this. So if the impact, let's say, is going to be $1 million, okay, $1 million is the impact, and the likelihood is 10% this is going to happen, then the risk is going to be $1 million times 0.10, or $100,000, okay? And this goes back to what I was saying earlier about cost benefit analysis. So if my risk is $100,000, am I going to put in a risk mitigation measure that costs $150,000? No, that doesn't make any sense. Okay. Okay. Risk factors that influence vulnerabilities: network and computer architecture conditions, the measures, the countermeasures that are installed, the technical difficulty of the attack. Okay, so the more technically adept the person has to be, then the less the probability. Okay, so when you look at CVEs, okay, they'll always assess the difficulty of the attack. And so if it's low, usually they'll just give you a difficulty of low, medium, and high, right? So if it's a low technical difficulty, then the risk is much greater, right? The probability of detection, okay, this includes the amount of time the adversary can remain in contact with the target without detection. The consequences of the incident and the cost of the incident are all the risk factors. Purpose of the risk assessment is to identify company assets, okay, and the potential loss of each and every threat recognized. Ensure that a security program is cost effective. Okay, that's emphasize that, cost effective. So, if we have a really difficult hack, okay, that's going to have minor consequences, we're not going to spend a lot of money on it, right? Doesn't make any sense. So the security program should be cost effective, relevant, and appropriate for the real risk it faces. Identify and prioritize. 4 main goals of risk assessment. First, assets. Identify, evaluate, and classify. Risks, you want to identify them. Quantity, the amount of potential threats, and the economic balance between the impact of the risk and the cost of the control, which goes back to what I was saying, okay, is that we, as somebody who's involved in risk management, okay, then you're likely that's at some point is going to be in your career, you're going to be managing risk. You have to make sure that there is actually a cost benefit analysis and that the costs don't exceed the risk. In risk analysis, there's at least two overall methods that are used, quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative is our preference, okay, because it's more precise, but the probabilities are really hard to be able to assess, okay? So quantitative is numeric and monetary values. So, you know, if we could measure the probabilities down to, say, 0.125, right? That would be great, okay? And we could evaluate all the consequences in terms of monetary values is $1.256 million, okay? The issue is that we can't do that, okay? That's ideal, but we can't do it. We don't have those kinds of numbers available to us, okay? So this is ideal. This is what everybody does, okay, is that you develop risk scenarios, you gather experts, you walk through a scenario to determine the results, you prioritize the risks and threats to the assets, and you build consensus for the best countermeasures. So this is like, okay, this is a high probability, a medium probability, and a low probability, okay? And then the consequences are high, low, and medium, and then you work from that kind of matrix, because you just don't have the data in most cases to do this type of analysis. I mean, what would you put, as a probability of, the threat from, say, a Russian actor against your system? Well, you can guess, based upon the vulnerabilities you have on your systems and the interest that they have, but you're fooling yourself if you think you can be precise in the probabilities. So there's a number of risk assessments. These are specifically for the SCADA ICS, and I have some of these broken down in assessments on Hackers Arise. There's several methodologies for risk assessments. Sandia has developed some, RAM-E, the infrastructure vulnerability assessment model, the hierarchical holographic modeling, interoperability input-output model, and the NIST RMF. So the risk management process includes risk assessment first, reduce risk to acceptable level, maintain that risk level. The risk must be managed. It can't be totally eliminated. That's a truism. Keep that in mind. It can't be eliminated, but you can manage it, right? And that's your job, is to manage it, not to eliminate it, because first of all, you're foolish to think you can eliminate it. And if you attempt to do that, you're going to end up spending way too much money on security to attempt to be totally risk-free, and you're never going to achieve it. So the steps include also prepare for the risk assessment, conduct the risk assessment, communicate and share the risk assessment, and then maintain your risk assessment. Common mistakes. We're almost done with the section here. We'll get on to some more hands-on stuff. Avoid the following, okay? Buying vendor hype, okay? Every time you let somebody into your office to sell you equipment, they're going to tell you that this is going to solve all of your problems. I can assure you, they're going to tell you this is the latest and greatest, and it's going to take care of all your problems. All right, don't believe it. Okay, and you have to be at least technically adept enough to know what this system is trying to do and what its weaknesses are, and whether or not it's actually capable of doing what it says it's going to do. But you can assure that the salesman's always going to tell you that it's the best thing out there and it's going to solve all your problems. Just give us your money, okay? Focusing on the wrong priorities, another big mistake, okay? Not accounting for changes. Okay, so if systems change, then the security configuration and attack surface changes. So that's where change control becomes really critical, right? Is you need to know what changed. You need to know what has happened since you first put in your security controls. IT security's misplaced focus, inconsistent patching, no proactive monitoring, and I can say from experience that this is often the case. Okay. OptiFX says the only secure system has absolutely no Ethernet modem connection and sits isolated inside of Faraday cage. Yes, you know, and even then it would be susceptible to physical attack, right? So, you know, and we sometimes overlook the potential for physical attacks against the system, right? Common misbelief: security is too difficult to implement, security is too risky, okay, on systems. Security can break SCADA systems. Sometimes it does, but we still have to implement it, believing that it'll only happen to others and not to us. Okay, we're done with that section. Okay, and I'm gonna let's take a 10-minute break, and we're gonna come back and we're gonna do some reconnaissance. Okay, and we'll do some fun stuff in reconnaissance and give my voice a chance to rest here a little bit. So come back in 10.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, welcome back. And what we're going to be doing here for the rest of today's class is we're going to be doing a little reconnaissance on some of those SCADA systems. Also, I want to remind you that if you didn't get the tools folder, okay, and I think it might say 2018. In any case, if you've got that QMod directory in there, you're good, no matter what the folder says. And if you didn't, email me. I'll send it out to you tonight. I sent it out twice now to everybody who enrolled in this class, which is, I think there's like 150 people enrolled in this class. And I have sent it out twice now. And if you didn't get it, let me know, and just send me a quick email and I'll send it out tonight after class. All right. So those of you who aren't familiar with Shodan, this is Shodan. All right. This is a tool developed by John Matherly out of San Diego. It's been around for over 10 years now. And what it does is that he goes and he sets up a system to scan all the IP addresses and ports in the world to try to determine what is the underlying technology behind those IP addresses and ports. And then he takes that information, okay, and puts it into a database that you can then search, okay? And so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take it off screen a sec here and log in. Not that I don't trust every one of you guys, but I'm going to go ahead and take it off screen anyways, and log in. And then we'll get going. All right, I'm logged in. Okay. And we're all friends here. Yeah. The thing is that these videos, I'm recording everything, and sometimes these videos get into other people's hands that aren't part of the class. We're all friends here, but these videos might very well end up in somebody else's hands, and who knows what they're going to do with it. Okay, so I have to be a little bit careful and the passwords in class. Not that I don't trust you. Okay, so this is Shodan. Shodan is as I mentioned, is simply like a search engine similar to like Google, except that what it does is it grabs the banner behind every IP address and port, okay, or darn near every one. All right, let's go click on Explore here. And you see when you click on Explore, it tells us that there's a number of different ways that we can go ahead and find information. You can see right here, we have industrial control systems, databases, network infrastructure, video games. I want to point out that Voltage up above says that he has used it in his Russia work as well, okay? And if you haven't paid attention, I've used it as well to find all of the Russian SCADA ICS systems and for attackers. So it's a very useful tool. All right. So let's go over here to the SCADA ICS systems. All right. And kind of gives you a breakdown of many of the SCADA ICS systems and the types of searches that will find those for you. So for instance, we can go over here and say explore Modbus. This is one we're working on, right? You can click on Modbus here. Come on. And notice the syntax right here. This is port 502. All right. So we know that Modbus runs on port 502. So we can search for all the systems in the world that using port 502, and most of them are going to be Modbus systems. Not all of them are. I mean, as you know, a as an administrator of a server, you can put any service on any port. Okay, so if I want to run HTTP on port 502, I can do that, right? And so you can see here, a lot of these have no data returned. All right. Also over here, you can see there's 334,000 in the world, right? And there's 2,374 in Russia Federation. Let's take a look at the Russia. Once again, let's take a look at the syntax. Okay. Port 502, country RU. Okay. Now, I'll go back and fix that port. 502. Country RU. Of course, you have to use, whatever country you're looking for, you have to use a 2-letter abbreviation for it. It actually will break it down by cities as well. So we can go into Moscow. Okay. Now, this is pulling the banner off these systems. Notice what's coming out in the banner. Unit ID 0, Unit ID 1, Unit ID 255. That tells us for certain that it is a Modbus system. We're probing inside that system and getting the unit IDs off the PLCs. All right. But you can see here, this one's a web server running on port 502. So when I said that you could run a web server on port 502, you can, right? Let's take a look at this guy right here in Moscow. This is Mobile Telesystems OJSC in Moscow. All right. You can see it tells us all of the ports that are running: 21, 22, 23, 80, 502, 503, 2345. This is kind of unusual for a Modbus system. Okay, they've got, looks like they have an FTP service running here. They've got SSH running here. There's a smart metering controller on port 23. They've got a web server here on port 80. And you see this is clearly Modbus running it. And they got it on 503 as well. Interesting. Okay. Let's try going to their web server and see if we can determine who this is. It does say that it's Mobile Telesystems. Let's see if we can connect to their web server. Two 113 87 13 25. There it is. Let's try just doing an admin on it. See if we can log into there. The web server here looks like it's for administrative purposes. Okay. No, not going to work on that one. Let's go back and look for others. So when you see this unit ID, slave ID data, that's for sure. Let's try to take a look at this one here. I don't know who this Vimpel.com is. Okay, this is more typical of a SCADA system. Port 161, okay, is open for SNMP. I'm using UDP. This is more typical of what you'll see. All right. Port 161, 502, and 4800. There's no web server running. Let's back up, look at some more. Here's the same company, Mobile Telesystems, another one of their servers, almost identical to the previous one. What's running on 2345? Let's check. It doesn't say. Tells us the port 2345 is open. Well, there's one way we can find out, right? We can actually try to connect to it. Okay, let's do it. Unauthorized. Well, that just went to Putin's logs, right? Let's go here and try to connect to that port and see what we find there. We can sometimes find some interesting stuff, right? And colon, what port was it? It's a port 2345. 2345, huh, interesting. No, nothing there. Let's keep looking. The other thing, you can find these systems by using port 502, but you can also find them by using the manufacturer's name. So for instance, if I was looking for Schneider Electric Systems, okay, which I am looking for Schneider Electric Systems in Russia because they're so relatively easy to take down, I can just go like this. And so port 502, or let's even take out the port 502, all right, because it might be running on a different port. It's probably running on port 502. And then let's go country, Russia. By the way, the Russians are already looking for me, so I don't really worry too much about this. It's just going to give them more ammunition to come looking for me. Okay. So these are the systems. You see that you can pull up the entire. This is the name of the PLC right here, right? And if I wanted to be this specific, I could actually ask Shodan to give me all of this particular PLC. This is usually in a small manufacturing. This PLC I'm pretty familiar with. It's usually in small manufacturing operations, right? Bolt just says extra step. I Google that name to find the user manual, which will tell me the default passwords exactly. Okay. And I have the default passwords on Hackers Arise. I'll put them up on the screen here. Let me show them to you if you haven't seen them already. I've got a whole list of by manufacturer of the default passwords. And then we can kind of put them up on the screen and maybe try some of them out. Let's see, where do I have them at? Here they are. I just found them. Okay, so it's under SCADA hacking default passwords. Okay. It's just the spreadsheet was so long I had to break it up into pieces. All right. And you can see here's the Schneider Electric. Okay, here's all the Schneider Electric. You can see in most cases, okay, some of them have no password at all, and it's in this field right here. Let's get rid of this. Admin, administrator, admin, user. Okay, this is this power logic. This is a particular type of PLC that they manufacture. Notice here that the Siemens Cymatic S7300 has a hard-coded password of basic. Okay. This unit here, which was the one that the Iranians were using, okay, the S1500 has a blank password. Okay. Let's go look for some of these. Okay. Let's do that. All right. Let's go away and let's go look for see if we can find the Siemens. In Russia. All right. 48 of them in Russia. This would be any Siemens. Okay. It's got a Microsoft RPC endpoint mapper. Okay. OptFX says, give us the juicy stuff. Let's breach one. Okay. Well, we'll find, see if we'll keep looking, see if we find one that's easy to breach. Okay. Like I said, I don't worry about Russia because I'm already on their bad guy list. All right. I can't really make it worse. All right. Oh, look what we have here. It kind of got obscured right here, but it looks like the username is coming through there. Let's go take a look at this one. Look at all the ports that are open on that thing. Look at this, busy, too many connections. Yeah, and that's my risk, Joe. Joe says, only if you fall out of a third-story building. He's making reference to, yeah, it's DNS. It says too many connections there. That the head of one of the oil companies in Russia suddenly fell out of a three-story building and died because he just happened to criticize Putin just before he fell out of a three-story window. It's amazing how that happens, right? What coincidence. Here's Microsoft RPC over HTTP, and he's not the only one, as a renegade says. He's right. I'm glad to see you guys are paying attention. You know, a lot of people aren't paying attention to the war in Russia. And so these things that are happening, they have no idea that these are happening, you know. That Putin is basically killing off all of his dissent in Russia, which is typical for him. Let's see what else we have here. Let's see if we can actually find specifically the S300. Let's go Siemens, okay, S7 1500. All right, let's see if we find, nope, don't find. Let's see if we can just go the S7 1500. This is one of their most popular PLCs, is the S7 1500, a Cymatic. All right, maybe none in Russia. Let's see if we can find them around the world. Huh? So that just means it doesn't show up in the banner. Okay. Yeah, didn't some Russian put poison on a door handle a few years ago? Yeah, that was Skripal in the UK. That he had been he actually had been a spy. You know, he'd been a double agent, and he left the Soviet Union, Russia, and ended up in UK, and they put poison on his door handle so that when he opened the door to his home and his daughter as well, okay, he got poisoned and almost died. And then, of course, they also tried to poison Navalny, who's one of his biggest critics in Russia. Alexander Navalny is one of his biggest critics and is trying to overthrow or get elected, is probably more accurate, in Russia, and they poisoned him as well, but he lived as well. So here's all the Siemens systems. Now, it's important to note, okay, that when you put in the keyword, it only works to identify that system if the banner has that word in it, okay? Some manufacturers don't put their name in the banners, right? And so just because it doesn't show up when you use the keyword doesn't mean that it's not there, okay? Yeah, Google Dorks can help as well. Exactly. We'll look at some Google Dorks as well, Renegade, okay? So here's all of the Siemens systems that are listed that have the word Siemens in their banners. Let's see if we can go to Russia. Maybe Russia doesn't have any Siemens system. Maybe they don't trust Siemens. Here it is right here. Looks like there's 44 of them. Okay. Once again, look at the syntax. Siemens country are you? Okay. Here's a Caucasus branch. It's a mobile network here. Looks like from this right here, this looks like a SMTP server is what it looks like. So far, these all look like they're using them for communication. They're using them for like mobile networks, the 44 that are in Russia. You see the cymatic net right there. These are obviously all Siemens systems. This is a Siemens automation server MIB. Here's cymatic industrial Ethernet. This one's in St. Petersburg, which happens to be Putin's home. So let's pick on St. Petersburg, okay, which had been the capital. St. Petersburg used to be the capital of Russia under the Tsars. Lots of ports open on this. Got port 80 and 443 are both open on it. It's an SMTP server right here. You can see it's XM SMTP. It's kind of unusual to see an SMTP server being shared with a SCADA system, but you have an example right here. There's all kinds of things that you'll find out there, but this is an example. Here's the Apache server here. So the Renegade says there's a lot of vulnerabilities over here to the left. So here's the vulnerabilities that they list, okay? And these aren't always accurate. It's their best guess, all right? So it's worthwhile if you were trying to attack the system to try these out. Oftentimes, Renegade seems to imply here is that if there's a lot of vulnerabilities out there, it might be a honeypot, all right? It may be, look at all the vulnerabilities on it. One thing that Shodan does do is they try to identify honeypots. Okay, so sometimes you'll come across and it'll have a label on it that says this is likely a honeypot. This one doesn't say that. Let's go take a look at these guys. Let's see what's going on with them. Let's go and try going to their web server first. One 64, 71, 46. Looks like it's not connecting to that web server. No. Oh, somehow it's still going to port 230. Let's go back and try that again. I wasn't watching that closely. I was watching your questions coming up. 164, 71, 46. Ah, we got it. All right. This is all we've got here is the web server on this particular unit, whoever this is. You know, as Voltage and I were talking about yesterday, okay, is that most of these Russian sites we found is that you can toggle between English and Russian on them. So in most cases, when you go into these Russian sites, so everything will be in Russian, and if you don't know how to read Russian, it becomes problematic. I've learned to read a little bit of Russian because of going into so many of their sites, but I'm trying to find the toggle between, it came up on the screen here just a minute ago, and it'll let you toggle between, there it is right there. Okay, let's go put it in English. All right, there we go. And almost all of them that come from, most of the companies in Russia are using software that comes from the West, okay, or China. And China is selling them, software that they sell around the world. And so you can almost always have an option to change the language. And usually there's at least Russian or English, okay? So see who this is. This is says the quality service provider guaranteed by many years of experience by our specialists, regular monitoring of knowledge and training for leading world manufacturers of electrical equipment. Okay. I'm still not sure who they are. It's an engineering company, it looks like. Administrator knows Russian. He can translate. Okay. And where do you live, administrator? What country are you in? Are you in Ukraine? Most Ukrainians know Russian. I find in Ukraine, there's a lot. Yeah, you're in Ukraine. In Ukraine, a lot of the systems default to Russian as well, because most everybody in Ukraine knows Russian. Well, we got it in English right now, so if I need the Russian, thank you. I'll call on you. All right. Looks like they're an electrical engineering company. What else do we know about them? Let's see, they've got, our search was for Siemens, is that right? Is that what we were looking for on this system? Let's take a look around and see what we can find. Cal asks, 1024 is a port that allows you to see this website. When you just type in a IP address, it defaults to port 80 or 443, okay? If you're not using one of those two ports, you have to actually, earlier I used the colon and the port number. That if you want to connect to a different port, okay, you have to use the port number. If you're just using going to the HTTP server, then So Cal says, so the website has several ports. The server has multiple ports, okay? The server has multiple ports. In this case, it has at least HTTP and HTTPS, but it has other ports open you can see as well, all right? There's lots of ports open here, all right? This is probably HTTP here as well. Let's check that out. Let's go down and look. Looks like, yeah, port 881 is Apache HTTP. So let's go check to see what they got running on that port, okay? You might find something interesting there. Usually when people don't use default ports, they have something that they're trying to hide. They want to keep confidential. All right, let's try 881. Looks like it's going to work, okay? But there's nothing here that's confidential, okay? It's the same as this running on ports. Oftentimes you'll see that when they want something confidential, they'll put it on another port and assume that people aren't going to look at the other ports, okay? But this is just a copy of port 80/443. It's the same information, but it's not HTTPS. So that means they had port 443 open. They got a email server here as well, XM SMTP. They do have Apache on port 443, but for some reason it's not connecting to that. It's not secure, it's not HTTPS. Let's see if I can force it to go on 443. Yeah, so they've got an HTTPS server, but they're not using it. All right. Interesting. So somebody's not really thinking about security at this particular. This might be a good place to attack, because obviously, who's ever running security here is not taking it very seriously. OptFX says any service can run on any port, but it's not exactly common, right? So any service can run on any port. So when we think about port 80 being HTTP, that's the default, but you can change it like these guys did. They changed it to 8. They have it running on port 80, but they also have it running on port 8081. Okay, so this is one of the ways that we can find these industrial control systems. You know, let's go back to our Schneider Electric port 502, and we'll keep on picking on Russia. Okay, since they deserve it, in my opinion, they deserve to be picked on. Here's a good one here. Let's take a look at this one. All right, so on port 2455, they've got the 3S Smart Software Solutions. I don't know who that is or what that is, okay? But this is definitely, it's definitely you can tell by the slave IDs right here, okay, that this is definitely a SCADA system. It's a Schneider Electric system. Let's look at some of the others. Here's another one here. Here we have FTP, drop bear SSH, TCP, HTTP 50. They got it running on 502 and 503. Okay, Cal says, so here we're doing recon. What are we looking for? We're looking for port 502 because you can see it right here. All right. So we're looking for, and this is be Modbus systems. So Modbus systems run usually on port 502. Okay. And so we're narrowing our search to port 502, which are usually Modbus, but there might be something else. But you can see that there are some that are not. But generally, it's going to be Modbus and country RU. So that's all we're doing. Okay, we can get even more. We can narrow down our search by looking at the keyword Schneider. Okay, and Schneider tends to always put their name in the banner, so it makes it relatively easy to find them. Right, so we narrow it down just those that have Schneider in their banner. There's only 30 of them. Okay, where they have Schneider Electric in the. And I said this is one of their manufacturing level. For instance, let's go ahead and copy this and let's go see if we can find the manual for this particular device. And all right, and here we go. There it is right there. We've got a picture of it. That's what we're connecting to, or actually we're seeing it. Okay. But if we look around and let's go Schneider Electric, say PDF, we can find the PDFs here. You see it's download PDF right here. This is the it's PDF file. Let's download it. Let's open it up. And these can be a treasure trove, okay? Administrator says you have my database. I have my database already. What database are you referring to? I might have missed part of the conversation there. But anyways, here are the details, okay? Yeah, all we've done, Cal, is that we found it, okay, using Shodan, and then we went to the manufacturer's website and downloaded the manual, okay? And these can be a real treasure trove, okay, in being able to understand how this particular unit works, okay? Let's see if they actually list the default passwords. Oftentimes they do, okay? This is usually used in like medium-sized companies, this particular product. I don't see any passwords in there. But it's not unusual that you do find the default passwords. Okay, look at here, the communication service. It runs over a Modbus TCP, Modbus TCP slave. It has a DHCP client, Modbus TCP client, and Ethernet adapter, okay? So they're telling us, what kind of connections it has, what kind of communication services it has. I'm just quickly scanning it, looking for anything that's we can use. Yeah, Nick says try administrator. often at least the Schneider often use admin or administrator. Let's go try some others out. I don't see anything, but this is the process here, is that you go and you find it, then you go and download the spec sheet on it. Let's see if we can find more information on it. Here's one. It's from a different company about the same product. A data sheet, PDF, prices. Okay, this is like a reseller, it looks like. Okay, and once again, this is not instantaneous, hack in 30 seconds or less, right? This looks like it might be exactly the same data sheet that we saw from the manufacturer. Yeah, it is. You got to do your research. Yeah, thank you, Michael. Here's down some tech specifications down below. Let's we were just looking for Schneider. Let's see if we can find some different product. Here's a different, this is it's a similar product, same class, the TM221CE. Yeah, here's a 241. Okay, let's go and let's find all of these in Russia. Okay, we can do that. All right, so we can just go. There may be only a few of them, but it's, for instance, if we found out what the passwords were on this particular one, we could find all of them that are in Russia. All right. Are you? It says none. Country are you? How come that didn't pull up any? It should have pulled up something. Let's try. We pulled it up right there, 24T. Maybe I got to put the underscore U in there too. Okay, yeah, thank you. There's only one in all of Russia. Here it is. Mikhail Myrov. Okay. It must be, maybe it's a company name here. All right. So you can see they got a TCP server. It's IP cameras there. Ah, all right. So they got IP cameras here, and then they have on 502, they've got the PLC. So Schneider makes a lot of different products, including building security, home security systems, right? So building security, home security, HVAC systems, security systems, those are all run by PLCs, right? And well, this is somebody's home. This is somebody's home who's got enough money. Okay. This is Mikhail Myerov's home. All right. Right. It's the Home Assist is the software for the camera. All right. Tells me that Python 3.0 is running on that particular system. We got a web server here. Let's go try some of these web servers out and see what's on them. He's got one at port 80. He's got a web server at port 8080. All right, let's go take a look. '95, 174, 109, 61. All right, let's go admin on it. Doesn't work. Okay. Let's try. He's got another server at 8080. Let's try that one out. So if I go ahead and go to something other than default, I go put the port number in. Let's wait and see what happens here. It's spinning. Peter says, try, call, email Schneider, ask for default password. You know, social engineering, as I've said many times, social engineering is a key part of most attacks. Okay. It's still trying. Let's try again. I got to put in the port numbers here again. 8080. It defaults to port 80. Voltage suggests just trying to use the Google the model number and the default password. Let's try that. Let's give it a shot. Here's the model number. I think it was an _U default password. And sometimes this works, right? Not many matches. Let's see. Here's the PDF for it. You know, we're using Brave here, and let's try. I'm going to try using Google instead, and search for the default password. All right. Looks like it's administrator. All right. Yep. Administrator. You got it, Chris. That's it. It's administrator. So let's see if we can't. Let's go back here. Yeah, one of the drawbacks to authentication, access denied, wait 30 seconds and try again. Okay. One of the drawbacks of using Brave is that it doesn't connect to Google, right? And so we weren't getting many results using Brave for the search. But when I would use Google, I found out that the default password's administrator. So, well, the other problem with using Google is that they're tracking, you know, everything that you enter. So that's why Brave doesn't use it. Brave is designed to be more secure so you don't get tracked. Let's wait 30 seconds and try again. That's one of the, this is obviously a security measure that I tried too many times, and it says I got to wait 30 seconds before I can try again. Yep. Michael says that's the point of Brave, is to avoid Google tracking. Exactly. So, but sometimes you got to use Google search. You know, sometimes it's unavoidable. Let's try again. There it is. All right. Let's see if Mikhail Mayoro, I think is his name, has changed his password. Okay, keep your fingers crossed. He changed it. All right, so try too many times. All right. Nick says uppercase A. All right, let's give it 30 seconds and I'll try again. All right. Yeah, try blank as well. That's another one. All right. Hacker Buff says, for my own protection, if I try to explore this at home, is it enough to use a VPN and a VM in home network, or do I need more? Well, it depends. You know, as I point out in my class on remaining anonymous, it depends on who you're trying to avoid. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and it also depends upon the VPN that you're using. All right. All right, let's go here. I had somebody write me the other day that said they were using that they were protected because they were using a VPN in Hong Kong. And I was like, how is that safe? Okay. Hong Kong is under the rule of a very authoritarian regime. Okay. I spelled it wrong. What is it? Administrator? Administrator? Did I got it right this time? Administrator, yeah. Okay, let's go try it again. Make sure I got it spelled right. Administrator, because eventually they're going to start seeing all these attempts and didn't work. Okay. Access denied, authorization required. Okay. Well, let's try another one. I'm going to go back and look for the one, see if we can find the same one that I found in Romania. Well, I hate to pick on Romania, but we're gonna try Romania. Country RO, right? Port 502. Any Romanians here today? And I found one in the last time I taught this class that I just went in with admin and took root control over the whole telecom system. Okay. Let's go. What is this one here? Let's take a look at this one. Okay, this only has port 502 on it, right? So this is probably, a system that's only being used for SCADA. And that's the way it should be, quite frankly, okay? Is that it should only have, you see, also you can see that, there's a little tag here that says ICS, okay? ICS here, where it says, we've determined that this is probably an ICS system. And sometimes let's go through and see if we find any of them that are honeypots. Here's Orange Romania. This is a telecom system here. The French company, and here's Vodafone here. Okay. I don't remember which one it was, but yeah, here's port 80, 443 is open. Let's take a look at these guys. All right. As far as your question goes, okay, connection's not private. Okay, it's all right. Proceed anyways. It's waiting for it to pull up the. For some reason it's not pulling up any web page here. Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. All right. Let's see if I don't hear it from anybody else. I wonder if anybody else can hear me. I've got a message that the connection was lost. I'm not I'm not getting any response. So I'm just going to pause for a little bit and wait for the others to come back.
We can all hear you, but you just can't see our messages.
So the messages are lost. Okay. All right. So I tried to connect